Hospital porters' pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. Welcome to this UFO Disclosure 2021. There's still time for it to happen, you know. Yeah, it's actually now early November, so that's kind of getting late in the year. But you know, it still could happen, and I actually believe it could happen at any time. I'll explain what I mean. But anyway, I'm just going to catch up on everything that's been going on in the world of UFO disclosure since the last time I did one, which is actually back in July. That was the one I did with Steve Bassett. Now, as you know, things have stagnated slightly since then. Things have slowed down. There's been a kind of lull. The June UAPTF report was kind of, well, as you know, it was just 9 pages. Well, 6 pages if you take away the bump in the small print. So 6 pages of stuff we mostly knew about already. A couple of interesting little tidbits that I explained in my videos on the subject, but generally you got the feeling that this was kind of very anticlimactic, and since then nothing of enormous significance has happened in that respect. However, I believe that there's a lot going on under the surface. I think Lou Elizondo said this. He says down in the engine room or something, the gearbox is moving, even though you can't see it. And I think I know what he means, actually. But anyway, I'll just go through some of the news that's been I've come across and been covering lately. Do read the Herpanwo voice blog, by the way, because a lot of this material I put on Herpanwo TV is often on there first. A lot of it is exclusive to Herpanwo voice. For example, I've written an article about the whole Travis Walton affair, with this the latest controversy surrounding Travis, which I'm not actually going to. I've mentioned it on a couple of radio shows, but I'm not actually going to bring it up on Herpanwo TV. I think I already have somewhere before, actually. But anyway, another little bit of drama that has occurred is 2 people actually sent me a video. It's actually the same video mirrored on 2 different channels. And this was a video all about what a horrible person Simon Parkes is. Yeah, it was about 3 hours long. I mean, on the original version of it. On the mirror, the person that edited it down a bit, so it was like 2 hours 59 minutes or something. And the person who wrote to me, one of the people who wrote to me, one of them just sent me the link. The other just said, "Look, Ben, are you still going to say still going to listen to Simon Parkes when you realise the truth about him, Ben? Watch this video. It'll tell you the truth about Simon Parkes." Well, this video actually was what I can only describe as a kangaroo court. There were people who came in and out of it. It's a large live stream. At one point there were 9 people on. Simon was not on the live stream himself. All the people were there to say what a horrible man Simon Parkes was. The host did say that he had invited Simon to take part, and Simon had not done so. And he'd also been talking to Simon's lawyer. Okay, well, that's something. I mean, that would have been my biggest gripe. If they hadn't invited him on, I would have probably made a special video or written an article about it, because I can't bear this ordeal by hashtag thing. You must have watched my tribunal videos. Yeah, this is just like the Larry Warren thing all over again, and the Darren Perks thing all over again, where these internet lynch mobs gather together and they just go after someone. And you know, the accusations made against Simon are pretty horrible. They brought in this kind of Me Too heroine who told her story about how evil Simon had been to her. And all the other people on the show were going, "We stand shoulder to shoulder with you. We respect your bravery. We hope that other women will come forward," and things like this. Well, presumably these people have not called the police. You often get that. That is a big red flag. If you call the police, I'll do it tomorrow. You see, because the thing is, if you're ever in a situation where somebody has committed a crime within the ufological community, I advise you simply to call the police. Now, the first thing the police will say, or the first thing your lawyer will say to you, is all that stuff you put on social media about the person you're accusing, take it down. Take it down, because if this is going to go to court, the last thing we need is the defence counsel standing up and saying, "How can my client have a fair trial when they've already been trialled in the pseudo justice of social media, lynch mobs and hate groups and things like this?" See what I mean? So So when you see when you hear that someone is a horrible person, and it's most recently happened with Miles Johnston, you hear that somebody is a really horrible person, and they know that because everyone's posting horrible things about them all over social media and things like this. This is a person who deserves to be in jail and things like that. Well, ask yourself what's really going on here, because this has happened to me. You know that. If you watch regularly, you'll know that I myself have been targeted with this sort of thing. People have made up lies about me very, very convincingly. People who are good actors and actresses who know how to throw together a really, really convincing yarn have unleashed the powers of their deception on me. So I must say, you know, I'm glad that the host of this live stream did invite Simon onto his show, but I mean, Simon chose not to go. Maybe Simon's choosing to defend himself another way. But for the person who wrote to me, and I think they're probably watching now, and I did write back and tell them this, there's absolutely no way in the world I'm going to condemn Simon Parkes because of some YouTube live stream. I don't care how much pathos there is in what anyone says. Feelings are not facts. Everyone's entitled to have their side of the story told, and I'm not going to condemn Simon Parkes without hearing his side of the story, however he chooses to tell it. You know, this is the sort of thing I wish we didn't have to put up with in ufology, but we do. In the UFO paranormal conspiracy theory world, this is why I suggested we bring in a tribunal system. I said this to Charles Scott. I mean, are you seriously saying, Charles, that you would go into court and you'd be happy to have a prosecution case only? These are the people who call themselves the Truth Movement as well. They're more like, they're acting like the kind of people who just believe. Like, you remember they used to, the tabloid newspapers used to print hit pieces about people, ordinary people, you know. This mother, you know, has a badly behaved child and things like that. And mobs would turn up at their house, you know, things like that. Anyway, let's get on to happier business. Well, sad business first of all. Paul Hellyer died. I suppose it's to be expected. He was 98 years old. But the Right Honourable Paul Hellyer MP, Minister of Defence for Canada. He did many other jobs within Canada. He's actually one of Canada's most senior statesmen, and he was elected to office. It was 1949, just after World War II, I think. He was an engineer. He was a pilot. He's been into UFOs since at least the 60s, but it's actually only in the last few years of his life, the last decade or so, that he decided to speak out to the extent that he did. He is probably, I think he must be the highest profile person ever to speak out openly on exopolitical matters, apart from Sir Eric Gairy, who was the Prime Minister of Grenada. Sir Eric Gairy addressed the first World UFO Congress in 1977. That's never happened before. There never before has it's the first and only time that a serving head of government has spoken at a UFO conference. Can't imagine Boris doing that, can you? Certainly not as he is now. But Hellyer passed away. I mean, he said he was writing a book. I hope he got to finish it. We might read it one day. But he was writing a book, actually. But he used to tour around, do conferences and things like that, even though he's 90-something. Very energetic old guy. He also talked openly about various other conspiracies, such as 9/11. He'd read Dr. Judy Wood's book, and as an engineer himself, I think he was very impressed with the science that Dr. Judy discovered about what caused the towers to go away, as she put it, to turn into dust. And it's odd, you know, what's very strange about Paul Hellyer's death is that the only obituaries that were published about him were people like me, people within the UFO world actually paid tribute to him. There were no mainstream obituaries at all in the Canadian press, in the mainstream Canadian press, which is remarkable when you think about it, because surely considering his stature, the fact that he was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada, which is the highest chamber in the Canadian government, the fact that he really was in government almost longer than anyone else. He was a career politician and statesman, and he's one of these sort of workhorse kind of statesmen rather than sort of career statesman, who just does various jobs without necessarily advancing themselves. I don't think he sought power, he just believed that he could do good in what he was doing. But no Canadian newspaper covered it. It's almost like a done thing whenever some famous person dies, especially a politician. They always write an obituary in the mainstream press. You know, if an MP dies, they get like a few words in the Times or the Observer. Hellyer got none of that. Literally, the only people who who published obituaries were us. The UFO crowd, the tinfoil hatters, the loonies. I wonder why that was. I wonder why Hellyer's death was ignored by the mainstream media so much. Is it because of his viewpoints on UFOs? Don't know. Anyway, there's something I want to bring up. Now, I did mention this I actually showed you the place in a previous video. It was one of my Watford videos. But I want to say a few more words about this. 7 Soho Square. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're at a very interesting place. Now, it's 7 Soho Square in London, and there's been a news article recently about this institution.
It was actually a few years ago, actually.
Was it? Oh, right.
September 2016. And I remember, I think I posted it in my alien autopsy group, or I posted it somewhere, bases maybe, but forgive me for being like hot and bothered, it's a hot one. But yeah, so this story was, it was in the Daily Express. Headline was revealed: UFO hunters' secret US-funded HQ in the heart of London's Soho. And this is that behind us. That's Soho Green. It's only like a tiny little bit of grass. But this building here. Let me read on. Oh, that's
sure.
Typical. Someone starts some music.
Oh right, okay.
Okay. But anyway, I bet you can still hear me.
I can still hear you. It's all right.
So, when the Ministry of Defence announced its decision to axe its UFO department, the Americans quickly stepped in to preserve it, and Pentagon officials knew just where to site offices for the new programme, neighbouring the UK headquarters of 20th Century Fox, famous for producing the sci-fi classics Alien, Independence Day, The Martian and Star Wars. Largely funded by US tax dollars, the office, established in 2009, boasts a team of mainly American analysts, though it does include a small British contingent who carry out clandestine work as tourists outside enjoy the oasis of the Square's park. Its work is overseen by a US colonel who visits regularly from Washington. There was pressure from a similar unit in the Pentagon which wanted to incorporate the MOD unit instead of serving military source last night. It was decided to move the unit to Soho Square. I understand that it now has a number of American personnel, he added. The relocation was even accidentally published in the Ministry of Defence's magazine, though few noticed. The operation took on a new role overseen by the Pentagon. It does, however, report directly to the MOD. All X-Files forms part of its work. While X-Files form part of its work, its main purpose is grounded in stark reality, the militarization of space. Of particular interest to the US is Project Condign, a highly classified MOD intelligence study of UFOs. Research by British scientists suggested some UFO sightings might be attributable to atmospheric plasmas, and further that a better understanding of this might lead to some novel military applications, including Star Wars type energy beams. Nick Pope, for it is him, who formerly ran the MOD's UFO project, confirmed that Britain has no evidence of extraterrestrial life. This is written in 2016, just to remind you. But he added, that's not to say that we didn't have some fascinating cases in our files. Of around 12,000 sightings that the programme investigated, around 5% remained unexplained. And Project Condign would have certainly grabbed the attention of Pentagon officials. Atmospheric plasma may or may not be at least a partial solution to the UFO mystery, he said. The weaponisation aspect of the phenomenon is exactly the sort of thing that might have caught the attention of the US government. When the MOD's UFO project was axed in 2009, a much more narrowly focused research effort may have taken its place, followed up on Project Condign's recommendation that further work should be done on the potential for novel military applications. An office undertaking such work might be regarded as sufficiently different from what went on before to avoid counting as misleading Parliament, as it could be regarded as a new standalone initiative. Liz Quintana, a Director of Military Science at the Royal United Services think tank said Britain has maintained its interest in space and the issue of UFOs, and it would not surprise me if the UK and the US had an office here. Space is becoming increasingly contested and congested. Some of this is peaceful, some of it has dual use, and some distinctly nefarious. Russia and China particularly are active. Asked about the unit at 7 Soho Square, a spokesman at the Ministry of Defence said, "We don't discuss individual units."
Oh,
and that is it. That's the whole article. So I just thought it interesting that we.
So that was in 2016. Which newspaper?
That was the Daily Express, and I can even have a little show you a little picture of the article.
In 2016. There. Now, it talks. What's interesting. Yeah, what that's it? No, blimey, look at that picture. That's typical, isn't it? So it's that building there. You see, it's that building
right.
there.
Yeah, I did notice that. So we were. It's just
it is the exact building. Yeah. Now, what strikes me about that is it's 2016. It refers to a special unit at the Pentagon for dealing with this. It sounds to me like what they're referring to is basically the UAPTF, although its name wasn't known in those days.
Yeah,
because we know that like the original ATIP was actually moved from the Defence Intelligence Agency to the Department of Defence and rebranded as UAPTF in 2012, which means it was active at that time. And it was somewhere in there. I mean, is it still there, do you think? I don't know. We could go and ring on. Actually, knock.
An inconspicuous type building.
Yeah.
It's like,
we can knock the door and just see what they say. And let's have a look what it's. It may have been divided into flats now. Right. See, there's no. This property is managed by Helix. All right. There's a reception desk in there. There's no one there. I could go in and. It says press it. Should I press it and see what happens? This is the intercom here, see if anything happens. There's a camera too, they're filming me while I'm filming them. Yeah. There's another camera over there, so they're probably watching me right now. There is, you can actually get in if you've got a code here. Yeah. Yeah. There is a reception desk which is unattended at the moment, you see there. No, I think I could go. Yeah, it's possible after all this time that particular unit's not actually. Yeah, it's quite like, especially if it's been in the newspaper, that they've actually moved it from this facility. But what that sounds like to me, it sounds like a kind of overseas safe house for the UAPTF. Or whatever they were called. They may have added they may have given it a different name back in those days. But I know that, you see, the project was started in 2007 did continue.
Apparently it's funded by US tax dollars.
All right, thank you very much, US taxpayer. Gareth, if you're watching.
2009 boasts a team of mainly American analysis, where it does include a small British contingent who carry out their clandestine work as tourists outside enjoyed the oasis of the Square's park.
The front of it just looks a stairwell. You can see stairs going up.
And it was saying, obviously, the US colonel would regularly come from Washington, basically, supposedly. So, yeah, the pressure was to form a similar unit in the Pentagon, which wanted to incorporate the MOD unit, instead of serving military service. Decided to move the unit to Soho Square, and I understand that it now has a number of American personnel. It's actually featured in MOD's magazine, so there you go. So,
right, so that's interesting, yeah.
Nice little escapade of the day.
Yeah. So we visited the UFO Central here in London. Well, actually, it may not be anymore. That was in 2016 it was. Obviously, a lot's changed since 2016. But, Colin, thanks for showing us that. I'm sure the viewers will find that very interesting.
You'll see that it's a stripped Art Deco building. And it's in this lovely little park surrounded by there's trees and there's benches and people go and sit and sunbathe and things like that. And it was set up in 2009. A UFO office was set up there, run by the Americans, by the American Department of Defense. This happened after Secretariat AS2 was closed down at the MOD. Now, the Ministry of Defence's UFO project was basically just made famous by His Royal Popeness. And basically what happened was, when this new organisation was set up at 7 Soho Square, this rather nondescript building. It's quite nice building, sort of stripped Art Deco, sort of 1920s kind of architecture. But the US Department of Defense set up a UFO investigation project there, and indeed some members of the UK Ministry of Defence were assisting them. So there was some of the UK's MOD working on the project with them as in an auxiliary role. Now the unit was supervised by a colonel who used to visit them every couple of months from the Pentagon, but he wasn't actually resident on there. And I think that's a very, very strange thing. It's strange to think that that little office building in the middle, in the heart of West End, in the theatre area, in the heart of the West End, included a UFO project. Now this UFO Investigation Unit wasn't exactly secret. It wasn't classified, but it was not talked about much. It wasn't publicised much. I never heard about this until Colin told me about it. I just thought it's as you saw, because I've inserted the little clip, it's the kind of place you could just walk past. But yeah, there was in one of those offices, I don't know which floor it was on, there was a UFO project. Now, what's odd was that now we don't know exactly how this ended. We know it started in 2009. It must have ended after 2016 because the article was written in 2016, and after that, sometime between then and the present day, this particular outfit moved out. And we know that because, as you saw, I went and rung the doorbell and there was no one in. And indeed, I went home and checked, and I just googled 7 Soho Square, and all its offices are currently up for let. So there's nothing there about any UFO project. A lot of the office space in there is currently advertised as vacant, which could explain why there was no one at the reception desk. So sometime between 2016 and the present day, that entire American outfit was shipped out of that particular office. Now, what's interesting is that the article talks about pressure from, it was closed due to pressure from a similar unit at the Pentagon. Bear in mind this article was published 2016. Pressure from a similar unit at the Pentagon. What are they talking about? They're obviously talking about ATIP stroke UAPTF, which at the time no one knew about. They just said they didn't actually name it. Of course, in December the following year, 2017, we all found out that there's something called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or it's advanced. Now, what's funny enough, those acronyms actually, there are two versions of those acronyms: Advanced Aerospace or Advanced Aerial. John Greenwald of the Black Vault has discovered some odd things about that. He's just done a video actually, which is a bit disturbing actually, because it indicates that Bob Bigelow got the contract for what he called a sweetheart deal, and I've not heard that expression before, but the moment Greenwald described it, I knew exactly what he was talking about, because it happens all the time in the NHS. What happens is when they bring in these contractors, they outsource these various projects in the NHS, these various departments. They have supposedly the customer's going to get the best value for money, so they have a tendering process and a committee is set up to evaluate which company can do the job most efficiently, get the best service for the best price. Of course, that's not what actually happens. What actually happens is that the various companies, rather than bidding, outwardly they will bid, they will submit a tender to bid for the service. But behind the scenes, there's simply private meetings where the people on the committee will be offered backhanders. They'll be offered, they're called finder's fees, which is just a euphemism for a bribe to give them the contract. Now, in the case of a particular contract at my hospital, the rumour circulated was that the chair of the committee, this was back in 1990 thereabouts, quite a long time ago, when the porters were first privatised. The guy on the committee running the whole thing, he suddenly started hanging around with the manager from Mediclean. I remember this woman called Midge. They suddenly started hanging out together. They were all sitting at the same table in the canteen, and I thought, this is a done deal. This is a done deal. There's no tender going. There's no real tendering process going on. And of course, Mediclean got the contract. So it appears, that seems to be unfortunately standard practice during when these things come about. It's like that joke from that comedy with Rick Mail, The New Statesman. He goes, oh well, there's this guy saying, but he's trying to explain something to another guy who's applying for a job, and he says, look, we must go through the correct channels. And the man said, but the MP, Mr. Bastard, has just bribed you. And he says, that is one of the correct channels. Now, maybe I shouldn't be too hard on Bob Bigelow here. I mean, he's just kind of playing the game that everyone else plays. He obviously, I think he sincerely believes in the UFO subject, and he wanted to work on the analysis of the physical debris, which of course he did. His company worked on the physical evidence, which is, well, probably the most important part of the whole thing. I mean, you can quibble over photographs and things like that. You can't quibble over a piece of a flying saucer. It either is or is not, and the evidence suggests that these are made of materials that you don't find on planet Earth. At least they're not manufactured on planet Earth. They are the same elements, and that's to be expected. So whenever someone says to you, well, what's so extraterrestrial about this? It's made out of iron and copper and aluminium and stuff like that. And you say, well, those are elements. They're all over the universe. We find them in the spectral patterns of distant galaxies. But it's not. The point is that these elements put together in a way that indicates to you their isotopic ratio and the type of alloy that are not made on Earth. Dr. Irena Scott has written 2 books about that. They're fascinating books. I've interviewed her. She's a very, very interesting lady. Anyway, so Bigelow got the contract, obviously, using one of these methods, which is underhand. But then again, really, it's just you feel like maybe we shouldn't be too hard on him, because what's he doing that everyone else doesn't do? Either way, the job got done. But Greenwald says that the ATIP sort of thing seems to be connected to that. His latest video is very interesting. I suggest you watch. Anyway, where was it? Back to 7 Soho Square. Yeah. Pressure from a similar unit at the Pentagon, says this 2016 article. I tried ringing the doorbell. Nothing else is in. Anyway, I tried ringing the doorbell, as you saw, and no one answered. But what about the question is, this is the big question, right? This unit from the Pentagon, this non-ATIP UAPTF unit, which is obviously set up deliberately to administer the investigations from the UK, which of course the US and UK have this special relationship, don't they? The question is, when this unit moved out of Soho Square, when it moved out, was it disbanded and did it go away, or did it move somewhere else? In which case, if it did, where did it move to? Maybe we'll find out. If you know, if you see some strange guys with American accents and tinfoil hats and binoculars walking in and out of some, a block of flats somewhere, or a lock-up garage, send me an email or leave a comment. Okay, the Space Force has kitted out. Yeah, I mean, you may have noticed that the Space Force has the Space Force now has its uniforms, or at least it's designed a uniform which it's testing at the moment. Now, several models have been selected, including a Lieutenant Colonel Alison Gonzalez, who is she's the deputy head of strategy for the Space Force, and she appears wearing this strange. It's a double-breasted tunic type thing with it's a tunic with like 6 buttons on it, representing the 6 services. You can wear it with a grey sort of cummerbund for special occasions. There's another photo of a young man graduating from as a Space Force cadet, which means there must be a Space Force Academy somewhere. I don't know. And he has a selfie taken with General Raymond. General Raymond is still wearing the standard double-breasted suit with the it's the same sort of suit that the U.S. Air Force have for their officers for their dress uniforms, their working dress uniforms, or the ceremonial dress uniforms. They have like a mess. There's like a mess dress as well, which is another type. But as I explained earlier, because people were asking me about the Space Force and how the non-commissioned officers and enlisted men are wearing like DPM camouflage, and it seems a bit weird because these are what you normally land forces normally wear, and I thought, well, maybe they're going to invade Endor like the rebels did in Return of the Jedi. Well, the truth of the matter is, the same reason that General Raymond is wearing this like double-breasted blue suit. It's very simple. It's because it's simply cheaper. It's cost. The tailor can just run off the same line and they stick different badges on it. Interestingly, the badge of the US Space Force is an arrowhead. Now that reminds me of something. Starfleet, doesn't it, in Star Trek? Or the Federation in Blake 7. They're arrowheads. The symbols are arrowheads. Just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder what's going on. Whether, and this is the point, I think, because the uniform has been described. I mean, it's not all the officers are wearing it. I mean, the models currently are wearing it. It might be rolled out for all the officers eventually. But at the moment, it's just being tested, and the fashion designs might sort of alter it a little bit. But I think it seems to be simply below flag rank as well, because General Raymond is not wearing one. He's just wearing his previous Space Force uniform. I suppose the question would be why that design? Because people have explained it looks very much like several sci-fi uniforms. For example, the Star Trek movies. It's been mentioned that several of the Star Trek movies, you see the Starfleet officers wearing a similar dress. It's been compared to a couple of other films. I think it very much, especially with the buttons, it looks very much like the uniforms of the House Atreides in Dune. And I don't mean the new Dune, which I haven't seen yet. I'm planning on seeing that at some point. Yes, I'll take my camera. I'm talking about a different Dune, the 1980s one by David Lynch, which is brilliant. It's a fantastic film. The guy who did Twin Peaks. It's a fantastic film, that. It looks very much like the uniforms in that. Now, I suppose the question would be, is there a reason why they've modelled it on sci-fi? I mean, maybe they're having a laugh with us. It wouldn't be the first time they tease us. Or it could have a certain purpose. It could have there could be an agenda behind it. Now, by that I mean, supposing the whole Space Force thing is part of this last card that Carol Rosin talked about in 2001 at the Disclosure Project press conference. The last card being the fake alien invasion. People will respond according to how they've been programmed. People are programmable. In a democracy. The role of the state in a democracy is very different from in a non-democracy. Non-democracies focus primarily on force, on the use of police, military, etc. Democracies focus primarily on the use of propaganda and cultural engineering to wield power. It's no coincidence that with the rise of democracies you've got think tanks, psychological think tanks, essentially the weaponization of psychology. And what's going to happen is these images you see Captain Kirk and these various other characters, fictional characters, wandering around wearing particular outfits. You'll find that people will see that, and these images will go very, very deep into their subconscious mind, which means that when something happens in real life which matches what happens, what they've seen in the cinema or on TV or even read in a book, a novel, you will find that they will actually respond in a particular way. They will respond in a controlled manner. Which is why when I see things like Independence Day, well, it's absolutely appalling film, but it's worth watching for intellectual reasons. And War of the Worlds, I've not seen the new War of the Worlds yet, but you see, these are fictional scenarios of hostile extraterrestrials invading the Earth. Of course, there could be hostile extraterrestrials out there planning to invade the Earth. I mean, I'll discuss that more in a little while. But if it happens, it's more likely to be, as the song from Muse goes, just our leaders in disguise. When the Zetas fill the skies, it's just our leaders in disguise. Which would be the last card. That would be a double or quit situation for the Illuminati. If the C word doesn't work, that is this disease that's sweeping the world at the moment. If they decide that has jumped the shark, who knows what's going to happen next? I mean, we are sort of poised now, waiting to find out what their next move is going to be, don't we? We are in that situation now because we're entering we're approaching the winter in the northern hemisphere. Are they going to go for another lockdown, or have they got some other nefarious plan up their sleeves? One thing's for sure, they are planning something. They're going to try something. What is it? At the moment, there's the whole climate change thing going on. You won't hear anything about the coronavirus until the 12th of November when COP26 finishes, and they'll be after some kind of accord. I'll cover that in the live stream at the time. But if they decide not to go for the lockdown, they'll go for something else. If that happens, then they'll want people to respond in the correct manner. Like they did with 9/11. They'll want people to respond like they did with 9/11. They'll encourage a certain response. This essentially would be a big 9/11. And it could be that when people see the Space Force will probably play a major role, will play a major role in the defense of the planet in such a scenario, and people will see the images of the real Space Force officers wearing those kinds of clothing will match what's within our subconscious mind, which we've seen in the media, and that it'll smooth the transition between our mindset before and after this invasion and it'll smooth it, and the transition will be towards a controlled response. And that could be why the uniforms have been designed the way they have. We won't know just yet because they've not been decided upon. I mean, the Space Force have already said they're going to, the Guardians as they call them, are going to be, they're going to test them on some of the Guardians and see whether they like them and whether they look good and how the public respond and things like that, and all kinds of other things. After they've had the feedback, they may redesign them again. So we'll have to see. I think it's interesting actually, on the very same day that the Space Force made this announcement, there was a newspaper article. It was actually headlines in the Mirror or the Daily Star or one of these other British red tops. Seth Seth was interviewed, and the headline was all about aliens this, aliens that. I wrote an article on Panway Voice about it. I can't remember the actual headlines, it varied, but it was all about evil aliens might destroy the Earth. Top alien hunter warns, and they called him an alien hunter. Dr. Seth Shostak has come up before on Panway TV because in my videos about SETI, because Seth Shostak is one of the pioneers of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. By that I mean pointing telescopes at the sky and seeing if they can spot them all those millions of light years away. Well, one of the bloody things might be flying a few dozen feet above the observatory. And the irony is absolutely intense, it really is. But Seth Shostak is a proponent of SETI, and like many proponents of SETI, he's a massive anti-ufological propagandist. He laughs at the whole idea of UFOs, like Carl Sagan did, like many others have. They just because if you think about it, the presence of UFOs makes their life's work a little bit redundant, doesn't it? You know, if there really are craft flying, or you know, if the craft they're looking for, if the things they're looking for millions of light years away have already found us, they're already here, they're already on the Earth, then kind of think, hey guys, you need to look a bit closer to home. You don't need those big telescopes, you know. You just need the little ones that Avi Loeb is using. Yeah, so that's kind of a bit ironic. But funny enough, Seth Shostak talked about the aliens blowing up Swindon. I don't know why he picked Swindon. He's American. Maybe he just doesn't like Sargon of Akkad. Who knows? But I just thought it was odd. They called him an alien hunter, and he talks about. In fact, Shostak's actual words were actually misquoted, but I thought it was a bit weird that they would have Seth Shostak, of all people, interviewed for this particular article, which they then title "Alien Hunter Warns Evil Aliens Could Nuke Swindon" and things like this. Yeah, I just thought that was the very same day that it was announced that the Space Force were kitting out. Okay guys, if you watch my gaming videos, which I never upload to YouTube, you know I did one about... I was actually playing a game at the moment which recreated the whole scenario. But yeah, USS Connecticut, a submarine. I won't go into all the details. Basically, this is a United States Navy submarine that was in the South China Sea, probably on some kind of intelligence gathering mission related to the China-Taiwanese conflict. We don't know exactly, and they keep these things quiet. Had a collision with an object. There's something they just call an object. Mildly damaged. We don't know how badly damaged the damage was, but 11 sailors were injured, but the injuries were not severe. We know that the power plant and the pressure hull was not compromised, which is good, because if that happens, the submarine sinks and everyone on board usually dies. The power plant wasn't either, which is good because it's a nuclear-powered submarine. And it's basically the submarine surfaced and limped to Guam, which is it's an island in the South Pacific where there was a US Navy base, and you get lots of guys singing songs about dames and things like that. But anyway, the Subbrief YouTube channel, which I talk about in that video, he's published another video where there are actually photographs now of the submarine. The USS Connecticut appears not to be damaged on the top part of its hull. It's below the waterline seems to be, if there's any visible damage, that's where it is. Or it could be the damage is all internal. We don't know. But yeah, he's anyway. The captain has just been relieved of his duties, so he's probably now in a lot of trouble. It's likely actually the submarine ran aground. I think that's the most likely thing. As I said at the time, it's probably what it is. The South China Sea is notoriously difficult to navigate in for submarines. It's chaotic. It has a very chaotic seabed. There are lots of shoals and abysses. It seems to be quite mountainous, as you might say. Its submarine probably just probably got lost and ran aground. So there was some speculation that it might have struck a Tic Tac or some other USO. Unidentified submerged object. Can't be ruled out, but it's unlikely. Someone, one of the skeptics in the UFO group I'm in on Facebook, published this article saying, "Mystery solved," he said. He always says things like that. And I put underneath, "Mystery probably solved." I love to tease him, I really do. It's the same guy I wore with a t-shirt for when I went to East Anglia UFO, yeah. Alright, so we'll find out if we hear anything more about that. We'll find out. The USS Seawolf is actually one of the oldest submarines in the US Navy, and has since been replaced by newer models. It's close to the end of its service life anyway. So it's possible the submarine will now be scrapped. It may be repaired and put back into service, but it's getting on a bit now. It's quite an old boat. Right, Area 51 monolith. Right, you know the monoliths that I made several videos about, including the one in Oxford, which disappeared by the time I got to it, unfortunately. Guess what? There's one at Area 51. It's a big black one. Yes, it's been spotted. It's the same shape as a standard monolith, about 190. It's a triangular prism, but it's much bigger. It's 190 feet tall. No one knows what it does, because I brought this up on the Kev Baker show, as you'll know if you watch. And I thought Kev might know something about it, because Kev used to be in the army and he was in the Royal Signals, and I thought he might recognise it as some kind of antenna, but he says no, never seen anything like that. No, what makes me think it might be something to do with communication or electronic countermeasures or electronic detection, is that it's at the north end of the runway at Home Airport, the main base campus. It's at the north end of that runway where all the other communications antennas are. And I thought maybe that's probably its role, actually. We don't know. But the people got to thank for this, actually, are there's some people who study Google Earth images, and they've discovered a monolith at Area 51. But many years earlier, this was actually discovered by the Dreamland Resort website. I don't know if you familiar with Dreamland Resort. It's run by this German guy who lives in Rachel. Now, it's very anti-UFO. In fact, in the FAQs, people say, "Are there aliens at Area 51?" And it says, "No, there are no aliens and UFOs there." It doesn't even leave it open to the possibilities. Totally rejects the concept of there being UFOs and aliens at Area 51. However, it's a very good resource. The Dreamland Resort people, they regularly go up to Tickaboo Peak. They used to go to Freedom Ridge before the government appropriated it. And they take photographs of Area 51 from as close as they can. And we know from the regular photograph, the panoramic photographs, which are really amazing to see, we know from those photographs that this prism, this monolith, was installed sometime between September 2005 and January 2006, because that's when the two photos... In September 2005 a photo was taken and it wasn't there. In January 2006 a photo was taken and it was there. So it's quite old, it's been there quite a while. So thanks to all those guys, thanks to the Dreamland Resort people for that. I don't believe it's probably not connected to the other monoliths that we've seen. There's the various monoliths that have appeared at various times. It's probably not connected to that. Anyway, well, this is interesting. Bill Nelson, Senator Bill Nelson, Biden appointed head of NASA, has said something very strange. He was in this conference with Larry Sabato, University of Virginia Center for Politics, and he had like that's funny, Larry Sabato, I've heard that name so many times and I don't know much about him, but he was being interviewed. He was interviewing this guy Bill Nelson for the University of Virginia Center for Politics, and it's a 55 minute interview, and at one point, quite close to the end actually, Nelson starts talking about UAP, and he mentions, firstly he says something, he does something which I can only describe as letting something slip. He talks about over 300 sightings. Now, the UAPTF report summary in June only talks about 150 sightings. This 300 is twice that number. So where did he get the number 300 from? The answer has to be that he got it from the classified annex, because as he's head of NASA, but he's also an elected senator, he will have received the classified annex. All members of Congress have received it, and he'll have read it, and I think he let slip that little bit of information. Or that's the question: is it deliberate? I'll come to that in a minute. But he also mentions that there's telemetry. Basically, as I say in my gaming videos, these are essentially master contacts, which means they are seen by the pilots, but they're also the very same objects are detected on radar, on sonar, or with electronic support measures. Because apparently they do radiate, they do leave behind a signature, they do have a radio signature. And when you put those together, they become like a master contact. That is a contact established to exist by more than one independent sensor. And Nelson basically gave that away. And of course, this is, as I've said earlier, the reason appears now we're sort of in a situation where nobody really wants to talk about this in the government, but it's actually not related to the UAP themselves, but just the fact that the releasing that telemetry might give away information about the capabilities of those ships, which is highly classified. Highly classified. They don't want to give away information about the capabilities of the ships. So that's something else that Nelson mentioned. And he also talks about the indicators, and this is something that Lou Elizondo was talking about in his series. These are the 5 indicators of UAP. The first is lift. The UAP can fly, but it does so without wings or without an envelope like a balloon. It doesn't, or rotor blades. It flies by some other, it has another method of lift which is not present in conventional Earth aircraft that we know of. I believe it in secret they have it, but from what we know of now, this probably refers to the control of gravity. They've learned how to control the force of gravity, and I believe that indeed the secret government have as well. Second, acceleration. The maneuverability and the speed and change of speed of these objects is way beyond the capability of any known man-made aircraft. They can go basically from hovering to 5,000 knots instantly, things like that. Sound barrier signatures, things like despite their enormous velocity, definitely supersonic, as Fravor said, they don't seem to affect the environment. You don't get a sonic boom, which means they've found some way of moving without air resistance. In other words, they found a way to displace the air without inertia, which is incredible. I mean, again, it's probably something due to the control of gravity. They managed to achieve that. And number 4, low observability. That means they essentially they can be detected, but then suddenly they're gone. They can't be detected. So they'll appear suddenly on your radar scope, and they'll be very, very definitely there, like I say, master contact. And then the next moment they'll be gone. And we've seen this ever since pilots began reporting the presence of UAP, way back even before World War II, during the ghost rocket era of the 1930s. They would say it was there 1 minute, and then I looked around, it was gone. And the 5th indicator is transmedium travel. Now that means something that can move from one medium to another, from the air to the water, primarily. It can just dip into the water and out of the water. Again, there's no vehicle we know of that can do that. I mean, for example, we have aircraft, we have submarines, we have ships. There's no such thing as the transmedium. You can't have one that then becomes the other. They're built for a specialised role in a particular medium by our engineers. The closest thing we have to transmedium travel is a seaplane. A seaplane can float on the water and travel on the water, but also it can fly in the air. Another would be an amphibious car. So, like the one they have in London, there's like a bus which is amphibious. It drives along the road and it'll go down a slipway and into the sea, into the River Thames, and then suddenly it's a boat. It floats like a boat and it can move like a boat. That's the closest we humans have to transmedium travel. NASA, the NASA head of Bill Nelson, the head of NASA, also said he was asked, could this be foreign adversarial? This is a catchphrase, foreign adversarial, that only really emerged in relation to UAP. It basically means a nation with hostile, possibly imperialistic intentions on the United States, and it's currently monitoring the coastline of the USA and things like that, and the airspace of the USA, to see what it can do as preparation or practice for an invasion. And he says, I hope it's not foreign adversarial. And I mean, I would too. I do too. I mean, if I was American, I'd be very concerned if that were the case, because you wouldn't want to start a war with a country. I mean, Russia and China are the ones most often used because they're the kind of fellow superpowers in this multipolar world. You have phrases like BRICS and stuff like that. You wouldn't. We don't know. These are just the countries. It's just guesswork when people say Russia and China. Even the people who do claim as foreign adversarial are just guessing. If you couldn't really fight a war successfully against an enemy with technology like that, you'd never win it. The good news is there is actually no evidence at all that the objects we've spotted, that pilots have spotted in the last few years, and indeed down the decades, is foreign adversarial in any way. This question went right back to the Foo Fighter phenomena of World War II. The RAF pilots who saw it thought it must be some kind of Nazi superweapon. Funny enough, the German pilots were seeing the same things, and they thought maybe it's something the Tommies have. The Tommies have developed some kind of weird aircraft. You see, but both were wrong. Both were wrong. There's no evidence to suggest that any nation is doing this. This is a human, or a private organisation is doing this. So why did? Finally, also I should point out Bill Nelson before I go on. Bill Nelson also mentions that NASA is looking into this sort of thing. But now this is an important confession, because he's admitted that NASA are involved directly in UAP research. This is something that has always been suspected, and it's many have denied it. They said no, it's all the Department of Defense doing it. You know, ATIP, UAPTF, things like that. They do all that. NASA have no role in this. NASA is a civilian organisation. It has nothing to do with the national defence of the realm. Well, that's actually not. It doesn't surprise me that that's not true, because NASA has been involved before in military activities. It's launched spice. The space shuttle has been used to launch spy satellites, for example. They even mention a classified operation on this particular mission and stuff like that. So it doesn't surprise me that NASA is involved in this. I mean, it could be that NASA has its own equivalent of the UAPTF, and Nelson sort of let that slip. And the question is, yeah, let it slip. Is that the right word? When analysing Nelson's words, I've got to ask myself: was it some kind of verbal blunder? I mean, he's quite old. He's 70 something. He's a Biden appointee, which it could be, you know, dementia sufferers together, guys, you know, that kind of thing. Well, he's obviously more compos mentis than Biden, but was it just a mistake? I mean, if so, then of course I suppose he might be in quite deep excrement for revealing stuff from the classified annex. I mean, Steve Bassett believes that eventually it will be leaked from Congress, and I think he's probably right, but it'll only be done so if whoever does the leaking can absolutely cover their tracks totally. Because if you start divulging classified information as a member of the US Congress, you'd be in extremely deep excrement. You really would. Legally, you would be. It'd be far more serious than simply giving out the UAPTF summary 2 weeks early. So was it disinformation? Is he lying? If he is, then it's part of this other lie, you know, the Greers of this world going on about Leslie Kean being disinfo and Lou Elizondo being disinfo, and they're all disinfo, and everyone's disinfo except me. He has this. Greer is really developing a truly Hawleyan paranoia, and as I said in his last video was quite shameful, I think, especially what he said about Leslie Kean, who really, if it hadn't been for her, he wouldn't be half what he is today, quite frankly. And then he accuses her of being a disinfo agent with zero evidence, just because she is now working with Mellon and Elizondo, and that is... I've ranted enough about that. I'm not going to do it again. Could it be? Was it deliberate? Is Bill Nelson actually blowing the whistle here? Again, it's possible it wasn't just like a slip of the tongue. He actually meant to put in some hidden message into his interview and see what he could get away with. That, I think, is a distinct possibility. I think it is, yeah. We'll see. Yeah, it is possibly deliberate. Could it be controlled? Is Bill Nelson essentially playing a role within controlled disclosure? Could be. Yeah. I don't know. There's no real answers to this. There's no real answer. We won't know just yet. But I think it's extraordinary that this particular individual decided to speak out on this subject. It's an extraordinary development that someone as prominent as the head of NASA, which is these are very carefully selected appointees, very carefully selected indeed. Anyway, just after that, something else pretty remarkable happened. There was a third UFO event at the National Press Club. Now, as you know, the National Press Club, one of the most prestigious media places in the world, which is why Steve Bassett has set up an office there. Captain Robert Salas, US Air Force retired, organised a press conference. It's 2 hours long. You can watch it on YouTube. It's very interesting. I mean, it's stories you've heard before, but again, it's the fact that it's been talked about at the National Press Club, I think, is extraordinarily significant. This is the third time there's been one of these events. The first, of course, was the May 2001 UFO Disclosure Project press conference organised by Stephen Greer. Second was the 2013 Citizen Hearing Initiative, organised by various people, Steve Bassett, Grant Cameron, a number of others. Both of those achieved moderate success. I mean, the 2001 press conference was, of course, hampered by 9/11. The 2013 one did have, I think it had some success. Of course, it was laughed at by the media. The UFO spotters, they called them, and things like this, which is incredibly demeaning. And they've said similar things about this particular latest conference, this third UFO-based press conference. Now, this one is special. This one is a special themed conference on the subject of nuclear weapons. What happened was, and it's very interesting, I think this is a product of the fact that the culture, this change of culture that started in 2017 regarding UFOs, I think is really bearing fruit now. It's probably something that the news reports were not quite as bad as they had been in 2013. I must say there was at least a modicum of respect. There were the jokers, of course, always come out, but you can just sense the difference. There's fireworks going on outside, yeah. There was basically, these are witnesses, people who were involved in nuclear weapons, including Captain Salas himself, talking about their encounters with UFOs. And indeed, Captain Salas's famous story is that he was a missile launch officer. His job was to sit in the to be in the underground bunker where they launched missiles from. And there's some kind of altercation going on outside. I don't know what it is. I can hear car horns. I don't know. Hope it's not the neighbours kicking up. At least Liberace's quiet. In 1967, he was like on alert. They were preparing, basically monitoring the missiles and preparing them for launch. If the order came through, they would press the button and launch the missiles as a strategic nuclear deterrent. Very, very responsible job. I'll come to that in a minute. But basically, the security guards on the surface above the bunker, they call it a capsule, phoned down and said, "Captain, there's a red light hovering around." And he said, "Oh right, okay. There's some red light, mysterious red light floating around the place." Next moment, he looked at his control panel. The missiles just all switched off. They all went down, went into unusable, and it took quite a lot of repair to get them going again. As if the presence of this red light, this flying red light, affected those missiles. Now this story has been repeated by many other witnesses within the missile combat crew community, including Russia as well. In Russia, in fact, around about the same time, I believe, that Captain Salas had his experience at a missile launch facility in Russia, the Soviet Union it was at the time. The opposite happened. The missile launch sequence began in one of these, completely without anyone making it happen. The missile launch sequence, a UFO turned up and hovered above the bunker, and the missile launch sequence began without anyone doing it, which shouldn't be allowed to happen. It can't happen. And the crew, the missile combat crew, in that they were phoning up Moscow and saying, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" They kept desperately trying to shut the whole thing down, and they managed literally seconds before launch. That's scary, isn't it? Yeah. There's Captain Salas brought in a number of guests, including the guy whose name I can't remember. He wrote the book, and he self-published the book UFOs and Nukes, and created also the very interesting documentary. It's an hour-long documentary. It's a sub-feature one. It's a very good documentary called UFOs and Nukes, about this sort of thing. Dr. Bob Jacobs, a guy I've met, he's actually a really likeable chap. He was a photographer monitoring a test launch of a ballistic missile. Now, some people have claimed that this was a part of a project it sounds insane, but the government had a plan to land a nuclear bomb on the moon and detonate it, which is insane when you think about it. But they were planning to do that just because, you know. I think maybe they probably wanted to make a new crater and call it, you know, US nuclear power or something like that. God knows why they wanted to do it. But it's literally a classic flying saucer appeared out of nowhere, flew all the way around this missile, was speeding. It was traveling thousands of miles per hour. Fired a beam of light at it. It's been described as a laser. We don't know if it was a laser. Lasers are usually invisible, actually, unless there's like a cloud of smoke for it to reflect off. And the next thing you know, the warhead just blew up. It just blew up. This UFO essentially shot down this missile. And Bob Jacobs he was, well, he wasn't watching this. He was filming the whole thing, but he didn't have a viewfinder. He was just didn't know what was going on. When he sent the film off to head office to be processed, he then gets a phone call from his boss, Major Mansman. Come into my office, Mr. Jacobs. Jacobs turned up and he says, "What the hell were you guys doing there?" And he says, "Nothing, sir, nothing." And he showed him the video, and Bob described what he saw. And then Mansman says, he says, "Mr. Jacobs," he says, "what is that? What do you think that is?" And he says, "Looks like we've got a UFO, sir." And he says, "Jacobs, you are never to refer to this again. Say nothing about it. Understood?" He says, "Yes, sir." What else could he do? Now, we could say, did Bob Jacobs make that up? Because the skeptics have accused him of making it up. Philip Klass, who Richard Dolan describes as an asshole. So this is before my time, but Klass tried to get Jacobs sacked. Jacobs at the time was actually lecturing at a university. He was doing a course in journalism. And Klass tried to get him sacked. He tried to get him cancelled. Today we'd use the word cancelled. He phoned up he wrote a letter or phoned up the dean and said, "Do you know that one of your faculty, Dr. Jacobs, is talking about aliens? Maybe you should reconsider whether you want this man in your employment." You know, the counsellors are just bloody horrible people. They really are. They just cancelled Terry Gilliam. I was watching a video about that. Bloody horrible. But anyway, this was before the era of cancel culture. Oh yeah. Thing about it is though, Major Mansman, of course, would have taken his own advice, and he would not have said anything. However, Major Mansman has since been tracked down. He's been interviewed, and he confirms that yes, it did happen. He's decided to speak out himself and say yes, there was a UFO there. Got it in black and white square. He's backing up Jacobs now. You know, the skeptics. I should point out that I'll come on to the skeptics in a minute. But now the question is, where does this come from? Because it's the one discernible constant, I think, of ET behaviour that we can glean. Is their interest in our nuclear weapons. I myself took a photograph, or when I was just hiking in Scotland, I took a photograph. I didn't see anything at the time, but when I looked at the photo later, there's a little flying disc in it. I made a video about that, if you remember, and it just so happens that within the frame of the photograph was a nuclear base. It was the Trident nuclear weapons facility at Faslane. This is in the Firth of Clyde, Scotland. I was, yeah. So it's the one thing it's the one constant we can actually glean from their behaviour. So why are they interested in our nuclear weapons? Now, there's several ways to interpret what they're doing. Some people have seen this in a very optimistic way, and they've said something like, it's brilliant. You see those UFOs, those aliens are looking after us. If it ever came to a point where we did launch our missiles at each other, during the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the West were at loggerheads, the aliens would have come down with their flying saucers and they would have taken out the missiles and we'd be safe. They're looking after us, you see, they're preventing us from blowing ourselves to pieces. That very positive speculation is possible, and goodness knows, I'm sure everyone agrees with me that I hope it's true. Shut up. I don't know who these people are. I just see them. I don't know who they are, but they live next to me. They're sounding something going on. They're sounding their car horns. You see, I honestly, of course, everyone would hope that that's the case. If it ever came to missiles being launched and the world's about to end, the aliens would step in and they'd intervene. On the other hand, this happy scenario may not be true. It could be. I hope it is, but it may not be. Supposing, for example, the aliens did not intend to stop us blowing each other up. After all, they didn't try to stop the Hiroshima bomb and the Nagasaki bomb, did they? They didn't try to prevent us testing the bombs at Trinity and other places. And the Bikini Atoll and the Maralinga site in Australia, they never tried to put a stop to those. And those tests alone have done terrible damage. You know, to this day, you know, the Marshall Islanders, they can't fish at Bikini Atoll because it's not safe to eat the fish. 70 odd years later, there's still radiation fallout there. Things like that. The Aborigines in Maralinga, you know, they're getting cancer and childbirth defects to this day. The aliens didn't put a stop to that, did they? What if the real reason they're interested in our nuclear weapons is very different? What if they what if they do have plans to invade or attack, and they want to test our nuclear deterrent and possibly find ways of disabling it? Because if that was the case, if that was their real motive, their behaviour would be exactly the same. Who knows? Who knows? But onto the skeptics, right? I do ask Mick West and the other skeptics, and Mick West not particularly, because Mick West just seems to be quite a nice guy. He's one of these skeptics. He's one of these skeptics I could sit down and have a beer with, and I could have a civilised discussion with him. If it was Professor Brian Cox, then the beer would go over his head. But Mick West I could sit down and have a beer with. It's one thing to call me mad and crazy. It's one thing to say that about Richard T. Hall, or Miles Johnston, or Win Keach, or Grant Cameron, or Steve Bassett. It's one thing to call us crazy, all right? And that's insulting and it's stupid, but it's calling these witnesses crazy is in another league of idiocy. And I do ask the skeptics to think carefully about that before they make a fool of themselves again and call these witnesses crazy. Because these witnesses, their job, by its very definition, was one in which their mental health was of prime concern. They were continuously monitored. They were continuously assessed. And at the first sign of any instability, that person will be removed from their responsibility for the nuclear weapons. The US Air Force is not obliged to give these people employment in that area. They can't just let you carry on if you're having a bad day. Because if any of those men ever got a screw loose, it would be the end of the world. So think about that, skeptics, before you open your mouths. Right, one more thing. Right, we're nearly at the end now. Have you seen? Have you seen the latest John Lewis ad? Now, Christmas adverts, like supermarket Christmas adverts, are kind of they're kind of a subculture now, a phenomenon of their own in the media. They're always very, very high budget. They're very well designed. They're always very imaginative, and they play for laughter and tears. And they're always highly emotionally charged. The latest one from John Lewis, which came out yesterday, I think, or the day before. I put up an article about it anyway. It's a little mini feature film, essentially, like they all are, and it tells the story of a young boy who sees something crashing down from the sky. He's on the bus, and something falls out of the sky, leaving behind a trail of multicoloured smoke. He goes to investigate it, and he sees a crashed UFO, and he sees that there's a young alien Nordic girl there, and he runs terrified. But he goes back the next day, and he starts making friends with this girl. He shows her some of the things to do with Christmas, such as Christmas tree lights and mince pies and snowball fights and things like that. He introduced her to some of the fun things of Christmas. When he goes back a third time, he sees that she's repaired her spaceship and she has to leave. And he gives her a present, and she kisses him, and she gets onto the spaceship, and he watches tearfully as it flies up into space, a bit like E.T. the extraterrestrial. The score is like it's Together in Electric Dreams. It's that score, which is it's a cover version, a very mellow cover version of that, and of course it is designed to be a moving sort of experience. They're still going on, they're still at it, but it's just, I think it's very interesting that that's happened now. We have this, because the Christmas ads like this have always been very carefully monitored in distant circles for various themes, and they often have a lot of, I think, quite sinister elements, including political correctness and fear upsetting things as well. So, for example, the last year's one showed Santa Claus getting very sick and catching COVID-19, and he's in hospital with an oxygen mask. And of course that's all propaganda, isn't it? And there's been many other examples of that sort of thing. And so essentially the way to control people's minds is very often through their hearts. And this ties into what I said earlier about the Space Force uniforms. propaganda is always on a very, very emotional level. It's always highly poignant. It's often very sentimental, and it is emotionally charged, as these adverts tend to be. In this case, we see it's like E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a film by Steven Spielberg. A friendly, likable alien, a Nordic girl this time, not a creature like E.T. who is on Earth, trapped, crashed UFO, makes friends with just one Earth individual, one human, and eventually flies back. And it's almost as if, again, they're preparing the psychological ground for something that's going to happen. It could be that. It doesn't just remind me of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, actually. It also reminds me very much of that UNICEF video about the little alien boy who arrives at school. It's called Marciano, an Unexpected Friend. It's a little video. It's a very, very short video, about 1.5 minutes long, which again tells the story of a young alien boy who's enrolled in a school. He's obviously alien, or he's a human-alien hybrid. He has like pictures of flying saucers on his bedroom wall and things like that at home. And the other kids, just at first they tease him and mock him, but later on they accept him because he has telekinetic powers, and he uses his telekinetic powers to levitate people during a school play, and he wins the children's respect. And this could be symbolic of a child from another country, a different race, religion, language, etc. For example, when I was at first school, I remember a young boy came and joined our class, and he was actually a Ugandan. His family had fled the Idi Amin regime in Uganda. This is a horrible individual. Idi Amin was a horrible individual. He killed a couple 100,000 people in his country. But Michael Salla wrote an article about this and thought that maybe we should interpret the extraterrestrial nature of this little boy more literally. And again, could it be, they're preparing us, children's minds, hearts and minds especially, have been prepared to accept some revelation that we're not alone. The character in the latest John Lewis ad is a young boy, probably about 7 or 8 years old. I don't know. Are they softening us up for disclosure? I don't know. It could be. Morgoth's review actually mentioned this as well. He interprets it in a typical he attacks what he believes is the politically correct angle of this, and that could be the case. But for me, I think the extraterrestrial element is more important in this particular advert. I think it's probably more relevant to what the message that's been given across. So there's a lot going on, but anyway, let's just have a look and see if there's any other exopolitical news.
Okay, guys, this has just emerged. Breaking news came out just yesterday. Will Congress now boldly go where no Congress has gone before? By Douglas Johnson, who is probably a relation of Andrew Johnson, I don't know. But anyway, this refers to some wranglings that are currently going on in the US Congress, in the legislative branch, which is very interesting. It actually mentions some names you may be familiar with, such as Marco Rubio and Mark Warner, who are both senators on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And but the various different proposals referring to the National Defence Authorization Act for this year, which, as you know, it's as you remember from the previous videos about last year's, is always passed sometime around Christmas, and basically it's all about the financial makeup of the Department of Defence for the following year. But what happened was with the last NDAA is that there was the attachment, the amendment or attachment, or the auxiliary legislation connected to it, specifically mentions the UAPTF. If you remember that, and there was a horrible amount of Trump derangement syndrome over that. They tried to block the act going through for the first time ever, because it's one of these acts that is totally a non-partisan, and everyone agrees, just let's be nice guys and pass this, because it's about the financing the military, paying for the little soldiers' kids' schools and stuff like that. And of course, the Trump derangement syndrome sufferers will try to get it blocked. It's really nasty. But anyway, I digress. Someone you probably never heard of before, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, has, I'm sure, been watching her Panmo TV. I bet she has. She's proposed setting up something called the ASRO. UFO Jesus has just done a little video about this. I mean, it's ASRO. I think it's going to be one of these acronyms that becomes like common parlance of the UFO community. The Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office. That's great, isn't it? I love the way they use these words. We've already culturally appropriated UAP, so I mean, ASRO is going to be the next one, I would say. But this would be this would be like the UAPTF on steroids. It would produce quarterly reports to the various committees in the Senate and the House, but also an annual public report. It would also be responsible for planning, coordinating all UAP research designations, and basically create detachments of line organisations. These will be major military or intelligence components to conduct field investigations of UAP, to ensure that the designated organisations or have available adequate personnel and the requisite expertise, equipment and transportation, basically to respond rapidly to incidents or patterns of UAP observations. I believe these organisations already exist. I mean, what else did Kaz Clark film in the fields at Penturk that day? This is UK, obviously not USA, but I'm sure that these things already exist. But she's proposing the establishment of a completely new financial and organisational structure for examining unidentified aerial phenomena. It's really quite amazing. Well, this would basically mean that there would be classified reports and there would be public reports. But as with the UAPTF, I mean, I assume this would replace the UAPTF, because basically it's doing the same thing, but it would be far better funded and far better organised. I don't know. I mean, this bill, they're currently wrangling about it in the houses. This bill has got to be passed by Christmas Day. We'll see what happens anyway. But anyway, if you want to look it up, it's on the Congressional Record, Proceedings and Debates of the 117th Congress, First Session, Volume 167, Number 194. And it's 4th of November 2021, Washington, Thursday, 4th of November 2021. The interesting bit is SA 482. It's an amendment. Mrs. Gillibrand submitted an amendment intended to be proposed to Amendment SA 386. 7 submitted by Mr. Reid, and it says here, establishment of structure and authorized authorities to address unidentified aerial phenomena. So, I mean, Senator Gillibrand could turn out to be a heroine in the disclosure process. Honestly, she will have had access to her own classified annex of the June 25th UAPTF report. So what else are we going to find out, I wonder? What else does she know? But obviously, like Bill Nelson, she's not actually letting anything slip, but she wants people to know. She wants everybody. She wants the public to find out. The American public, I think she believes, has a right to know and a need to know, etc., etc. So strength to her arm, Mrs. Gilliland. I'm tempted to say Gilliland. I know she's Gillibrand. She's not a relation of James Gilliland, but... she's the kind of person probably who's been studying a lot of this in her spare time, and probably secretly harbouring dissident thoughts about UAPs. And then one day, she sees the UAPTF report. She's probably read it. All those, what was it Bill Nelson said? 300 sightings, not 150, 300. Some of those could be really quite extraordinary. Remember, these are classified reports considered too hot for FOIA, considered unacceptable to be put into the public report. So, for what that's worth anyway. And now she's in a position to try and do something about it. So good luck to her, I say. I'm be quite excited to find out where this goes. Breaking news, guys, just come out. But UFO Jesus has just done a video about it where he goes into a bit more detail. Post-disclosure world, so check that out.
Anyway, guys, right, this is probably going to be, I think, the last UFO disclosure 2021 video. I probably will not make another of these until next year. As always, I always do one right at the beginning of a new year. Although this year, of course, I did the Boris Johnson disclosure speech video, which I'm very pleased with. I really like that. But obviously, I won't be able to do that again. But I think there will be another one. I think at the beginning of the new year. Hopefully, by then we'll know a bit more, because the second UAPTF report will be out. There's also this other thing from the Senate which might grow legs. We never know. You never know, but we'll see. Either way, I will be reporting on what happened during this year, if there are more developments, and also the prospects for UFO disclosure in 2022. It could be. By the way, I'm actually speaking at the Swansea UFO Network on the 6th of January, so do get along to that if you can. If you go to sufon.org, the details are there. I'll be doing a video, but I'll say more about it closer to the time. But I am booked to speak about UFOs and other things there. So the scene, as you might call it, is active. It is active and it's running, and indeed, as you've just seen, Steve Bassett is still fighting the good fight, and I'm with him all the way, as I'm with all the other honest people who want to see an end to secrecy and the truth, the acknowledgement that we're not alone. Because I believe this, I don't go along with what Richard Dolan has been saying about the necessity for some kind of trigger event. UFO disclosure, I think, could literally happen at any time. It could literally happen. Well, today's Saturday that I'm recording this. It could happen next Friday. I think it will be a Friday evening, as Dolan and Zabel predicted in AD after disclosure. But it could literally happen any time now. I mean, things are so chaotic at the moment. The bad guys have currently taken a pause to consider their next move. We have to consider our next move. Everything's up in the air at the moment. But UFO disclosure could literally, I think, no trigger event is needed. I think the trigger events have already happened. We're just waiting now for a position where possibly Trump or someone connected to Trump could just get the word out. Biden doesn't have to do it. It could be done from the Pentagon. It could be done by General Raymond. It could be done by someone from the US Air Force or another branch of the military. It could be done by the good guys within the Congress, within the legislative branch or the judiciary. It could be done in court. It could be done anywhere. UFO disclosure could happen. And yeah, so you may literally not know what's going to happen. You may not get a clue what's going to happen until virtually when it does. Or you'll probably get a few hours notice, but the idea that somehow there has to be another Phoenix light or something before anything goes ahead, no, that doesn't have to be that at all. It could coincide with the publication of the next UAPTF report, which has to happen, I think, before Christmas Day. That would be quite disclosure on Christmas Day would be quite something, wouldn't it? You can just imagine the memes. So, despite the fact that I've said this will probably be my last UFO disclosure video of the year, it might not be. There may be others. We'll see if there is. Obviously, if something happens, I will do another one of these videos before the end of the year. But in the meantime, I'm planning lots more videos to come, so keep your eye on the channel. I thank you all of you for watching. Once again, keep watching for new videos. Check out my old ones if you're new to this channel. And we'll see you again very, very soon. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.